It has always been you. Chapter 1. First Meeting. They had been inseparable since they were 16. School projects, late-night sleepovers, countless hours at each other's houses, their lives had threaded together before either of them realized it. Zoe McCain had arrived in Riverdale in the middle of the school term, a lanky brunette with hazel eyes and sharp features, her Ottawa life left behind in a blur. The Riverdale School of Fine Arts was a labyrinth of new hallways and whispered rules. A few lost classes and late arrivals had left her raw and frayed. Now she sat curled on a toilet seat in a locked bathroom stall, tears streaking her cheeks, wishing she could go home and forget this rigid little town. The bathroom door swung open. Boots squeaked on linoleum. She pulled her feet up, trying to vanish. The boots stopped in front of her cubicle. A soft knock followed, then a gentle voice. "Hello? Are you okay?" Zoe froze. She didn't know who was on the other side, but she wasn't ready for more mockery. She stayed silent. The voice came again, warm but firm. "My name's Isabella Siegel. Are you Zoe McCain?" Zoe's breath caught. Slowly, she let her feet touch the floor and reached for the lock. The door creaked open. Isabella stood there, black hair in a long braid over her shoulder, emerald eyes soft and steady, a smile like a candle in the dark. "Hi," she said quietly. "Are you okay?" Zoe nodded, hesitant. Isabella stretched out a hand. Warmth flooded Zoe's palm as she took it and rose. They stepped out of the cubicle together. Isabella only let go of her hand once they were in the open. Zoe felt the loss immediately and almost reached back. They stood there, simply looking at each other. "You're beautiful, Zoe," Isabella murmured. "But your eyes are sad." Zoe fumbled with the hem of her shirt, painfully aware of the warmth still radiating from her. "I feel like I'm lost in a storm. New school. Everything." Isabella's smile tilted Zoe's world. It was the purest smile she'd ever seen, and she knew, with a strange certainty, she wanted to see that smile for the rest of her life. Warmth bloomed inside her, melting the ache. "Tell me about yourself," Isabella said, hopping onto the basin counter. She tore open a chocolate bar, split it in half, and held one piece out. Zoe accepted, murmured thanks, and climbed up to sit beside her. That was the start of everything. Chapter 2. Friendship Evolving. They were different and yet the same. Isabella, artistic, dreaming of music and a life lived on stage. Zoe, sharp and quiet, building code in her head and dreaming of technology. They became each other's silent protector. Isabella would stand up for Zoe, even against Zoe's rigid parents, and Zoe would hover at Isabella's side like a quiet shadow, ready to catch her. Late one evening they lay on Zoe's bed, side by side, phones in hand, pointing at memes and college websites. Isabella leaned over to see something on Zoe's screen. Their faces were suddenly close, breaths mingling. Zoe's skin prickled. She was sure Isabella felt it too. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat the world stopped, only the heat between them existed. Zoe felt the pull, the lean, but just as their lips might have met, Isabella looked away, making a joke. They both laughed awkwardly and returned to their phones, but the moment stayed like a live wire between them. Moments like that kept happening. Neither spoke of it, but both knew. Zoe's parents pressed the same old path on her: college, degree, a nice young man to marry. But Zoe wanted none of it. Not when her heart raced every time Isabella was near or touched her, even by accident, even on purpose. And when Isabella laughed with boys, Zoe felt jealousy strike like fangs. She'd pull Isabella away with some flimsy excuse. That winter they built their own world. Snuggled under blankets, mugs of hot chocolate in hand, they watched old movies and dreamed of one day having their own place. "You'll be a great musician, Bella," Zoe said softly, the nickname slipping out. "Your concerts will sell out months in advance." Isabella's smile widened at the name. "You always know how to make me smile," she said. "I love that smile," Zoe whispered. "It's the only thing that keeps the dark out." Isabella reached up, brushed a strand of hair from Zoe's face, cupped her cheeks, and looked at her. "Then I'll never stop smiling for you." Zoe's heart thundered. Then a notification pinged on Isabella's phone, shattering the moment. Her cousin's message: their grandfather was ill, in hospital. A car was on the way. Zoe read the message over her shoulder. "I'm coming with," she said, no hesitation. They rode in the back seat together. Zoe held Isabella the whole way. Benjamin Siegel was more than a grandfather. He was the only parent Isabella had left after the car accident that took her mother and father. At the hospital, her cousin Hanslow waited, pale and stricken. "He's in the emergency room," he said. "They think it's a heart attack." Isabella's knees gave way. Zoe caught her, held her, stroked her hair. When the doctor emerged at last, Isabella's voice was small. "Can I see him?" With Zoe's hand in hers, she stepped into the room. Benjamin lay beneath tubes and beeping machines. Isabella took his frail hand. "You better not leave me, Pops." Zoe stood behind her, a hand on her shoulder. A week later, they were back in Zoe's room, filling out college applications. Soft music played. Zoe jumped up suddenly, tugged Isabella up with her. "Dance with me, Bella." "Are you crazy?" "I can't dance." Zoe just pulled her closer. They swayed gently, Isabella's head on Zoe's shoulder. "Do you know why I call you Bella?" Zoe asked. "No. Tell me." Zoe smoothed stray strands of hair, then whispered near her ear. "It means beautiful." "That's what you are." Heat bloomed on Isabella's cheeks. She leaned in closer. "This," she whispered, "is the purest form of authenticity." Zoe smiled against her hair. Chapter 3: Storms on the Horizon. Isabella was curled into Zoe's side when the phone call came that shattered her world. Benjamin Siegel had collapsed in his study. By the time they reached the hospital, it was too late. Isabella's sobs echoed through the halls. Zoe tried to console her, but for the first time, Isabella was utterly alone. The funeral was quick. Isabella sat rigid in the pew, her hands and fists on her lap. Zoe sat behind her, ready to anchor her when needed. Then came another blow. Benjamin had invested everything in a company that folded the day he died. Everything he owned was gone. In one breath, Isabella lost her last parent and her home. Zoe offered her a place, but pride won. Isabella pushed everyone away, even Zoe. Then one night she vanished. Zoe searched everywhere. No trace. She cried herself to sleep every night. The only thing holding her up was a promise she'd made to Isabella months before, to become something worthy of the dreams they'd built together. Years passed. Zoe finished her degree, became the youngest tech specialist in her field, and started a company called Gemini. She worked herself to a standstill. She built a life as if she were building a shrine. A piano in the corner. A guitar beside it. Lilies in the garden because they were Bella's favorite. A kitchen decorated exactly as they'd planned in late-night chats. A bedroom turned into a sanctuary fit for a princess. A bathroom with a corner jacuzzi and a huge walk-in shower, so we can both be in it and not feel cramped, Isabella had once teased. Every room was a memory. Zoe was a ghost inside her own life, her company the only thing keeping her from unraveling. 7 years passed. Still, she worked. Still, she remembered. One late Friday night, she received a system upgrade alert for a club she maintained for a friend. Normally she'd do it remotely, but looking at the time, she decided to go in person and head home afterwards. The club was dimly lit, not yet open. She slipped through the tables toward the back office. Music drifted from the piano. Slow. Familiar. Her steps faltered. Something about the melody reached into her and pulled. From the corner of her eye, she caught a figure at the piano. The shape, the tilt of the head, it was familiar enough to hurt. The song ended. Before she could stop herself, she moved closer. Her heart stopped. Isabella finished the last note and looked up at the sound of footsteps. Their eyes met. The world tilted on its axis. 7 years of distance evaporated. Zoe's lips parted. A name formed soundlessly. Bella. For a heartbeat they just stared, ghosts of the girls they had been flickering in the dim light. All the years, the grief, the hunger between them coiled tight. Isabella rose slowly from the bench, fingers trembling as if the keys still burned. Zoe stepped closer, her pulse hammering, every cell remembering. And the space between them, after 7 long years, Felt like coming home and stepping into a storm all at once. Chapter 4, Reunion. The silence between them was electric, charged with 7 years of absence and 1,000 unspoken words. Zoe stood frozen, her hazel eyes wide, her breath uneven. She didn't trust herself to blink in case Isabella vanished like smoke. Bella, her voice cracked on the name, barely audible, as if saying it out loud might break the fragile miracle standing in front of her. Isabella's lips parted. Her emerald eyes shimmered, torn between disbelief and something much deeper. For a moment she seemed to forget how to breathe. Zoe. The sound of it shattered Zoe. She stumbled forward, as if pulled by a force she couldn't fight. 7 years, Zoe whispered, her voice raw. 7 years. I searched. Her throat tightened, the words faltering. And here you are. Just here. Isabella's jaw trembled. She tried to steady herself, but her voice came low, shaking. You look older, stronger, different. But you're still you. Zoe almost laughed, but it broke into something else, something brittle. And you. God, Bella, I thought. Her voice faltered again. She clenched her fists, fighting the storm rising inside. I thought you were gone forever. For a long moment, neither moved. The distance between them was no more than a few feet, but it felt like the entire lost years stretched in that space. Finally, Zoe stepped closer. Her hand lifted, hesitating inches from Isabella's face, as though afraid to touch and find her unreal. But Isabella tilted her head into the hand, her eyes closing as Zoe's palm brushed her cheek. The touch broke them both. Zoe's voice came ragged. Do you know what it's been like, building a life around your ghost? Every room, every day, Bella, you were there. You never left me. Not for a single breath. Isabella opened her eyes, green fire meeting hazel storm. Tears welled, threatening to spill. And I ran. I drifted. I thought if I stayed, I'd break everything you dreamed for yourself. Damn it, Bella, Zoe choked, you were my dream. The words hung between them, trembling. Isabella pressed a hand to Zoe's chest, right over her heart, feeling it hammering like a war drum. I only started here a month ago, she whispered, the confession falling like a stone in still water. After years of wandering, of sleeping in strangers' beds, in cities that never felt like home, I found myself back here. And the first time I touched this piano, I thought of you. Zoe's fingers tightened around Isabella's wrist, grounding herself. You should have called me. Written. Anything. I couldn't, Isabella said softly, breaking. I didn't know how to face you, after leaving you behind. The silence stretched again, thick with everything unsaid. Finally, Zoe's voice softened, though the rawness still cut through. Well, you're here now. Her thumb brushed across Isabella's cheek, catching a tear. And I swear, I'm not letting you vanish again. Isabella leaned into her touch, her own breath uneven. Then don't let go. And for the first time in 7 years, Zoe pulled her twin flame back into her arms. Chapter 5, Fragments of a Lost Road. The music of the club faded into silence. The two of them sat in the dim corner booth after hours, an untouched glass of water between them. Zoe couldn't stop looking at her. 7 years, and still Isabella's presence made the world tilt. Her hair was longer now, her eyes older, shadows lingered where once there had only been fire. Tell me, Zoe said quietly, her hand curled around the edge of the table as if holding herself steady. Everything. Where you've been. Why you left me with nothing but silence. Isabella exhaled, slow and shaky, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass. For a moment she looked like she might bolt again. But Zoe's gaze held her there, steady, unyielding. I thought I was protecting you, Isabella began, her voice raw. After Pops died, after the money was gone, I felt like a burden. Everyone who tried to help me, I pushed them away. You most of all. Because you were the one thing I couldn't bear to lose. And if I stayed, I was terrified you'd see me unravel, and she broke off, shaking her head. I thought leaving was mercy. Mercy? Zoe's voice cracked, sharp with hurt. Bella, you shattered me. Tears burned Isabella's eyes. She forced herself to go on. I drifted. From place to place. Cities blurred together. cheap apartments, bars, couch to couch. Some nights I played piano in dive clubs for tips, some nights I didn't even know where I'd sleep. I told myself I was searching for something, but really, I was just running. From grief. From myself. From you. Zoe swallowed hard. She wanted to be furious, but the sight of Isabella's trembling hands and broken voice stripped the anger bare. I met people, Isabella whispered, shame softening her words. I let some of them close, thinking maybe I could forget the way you looked at me, the way your smile felt like home. But it never lasted. Nothing held me. Every time I closed my eyes, it was your face. Your laugh. Your voice. Always you. Zoe reached across the table, her hand covering Isabella's. The touch was steady, grounding. And now? Zoe asked softer. Why here? Why now? Isabella finally lifted her gaze, green fire shining through the storm. Because I was tired of running. Because the only place I've ever belonged is where you are. Her breath caught, tears threatening again. And I prayed, God, I prayed that somehow the universe would let me find you again. Zoe's hand tightened around hers. Her voice was low, but every word burned. The universe didn't let you find me, Bella. It dragged you back. Right here. Right to me. For a long moment, they simply sat there, holding on to each other, letting the weight of lost years settle between them. And in that fragile silence, Zoe realized the real battle wasn't finding Isabella. It would be learning how to trust her again and deciding whether love that had burned so fiercely once could survive the scars of 7 years apart. Chapter 6. One night. The club had emptied, chairs stacked, lights dimmed. Still, Zoe and Isabella lingered, as if neither could bear to break the spell of being face to face again. Finally, Zoe stood, her heart pounding with something between fear and defiance. Come with me, she said quietly. Isabella tilted her head. Where? My place. Just for tonight. I don't want to lose you again, Bella. Not after finding you. Isabella's lips parted as if to protest, but the plea in Zoe's eyes stole her words. They stepped into the night together, the city's hum pressing around them. Zoe's car was parked just down the street. Isabella slid into the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The drive was silent except for the occasional glance, Zoe stealing looks as if afraid she'd vanish when the headlights hit the dark. When they arrived, Zoe led her inside. The house breathed of Isabella. Every room whispered her memory, the piano, the guitar, the lilies, the kitchen colored in their late-night plans. Isabella froze, her breath caught in her throat. Zoe, she whispered, running her fingers lightly over the piano keys. You built all this? Zoe's voice cracked. I built you into every corner of my life. I couldn't stop. Even when you were gone, you never left me. Tears shimmered in Isabella's eyes, but she tried to laugh softly, shaking her head. You're insane. Zoe stepped closer, her voice low. Insane for you. For a while, they didn't speak. Zoe showed her the kitchen, the bedroom, the garden glowing faintly in the moonlight. They ended up sitting on the edge of Zoe's bed, silence heavy with all the words they weren't ready to say. It was only when Isabella rose to leave that Zoe caught it. Wait, where are you staying? Isabella hesitated, then sighed. A motel. Just a few streets from the club. I pay day to day when I can scrape enough together. Zoe's chest clenched. She stood, her voice trembling with restrained anger and heartbreak. A motel? Bella, you can't keep living like that. I'll be fine, Isabella murmured, her pride a thin veil. I always survive. No, Zoe shook her head fiercely. Not anymore. Not when I have a house with space, with a bed that's half empty, with her voice broke. With a heart that's been waiting for you to come home. Isabella looked away, guilt shadowing her features. Please, Zoe whispered, stepping close, cupping her face with both hands. Stay. If not for forever, then at least for now. I can't let you go back to that motel. Not when you're right here. Isabella trembled beneath her touch. Slowly, she nodded, the fight leaving her shoulders. Just for now, she whispered back. But Zoe knew, just for now was the beginning of everything they'd both been starving for. Chapter 7. The First Night. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that held its breath. Isabella stood at the edge of Zoe's bed, her bag still slung over one shoulder. She looked uncertain, like a runaway who had forgotten what home felt like. "You don't have to," she began. Zoe shook her head, stepping closer. "Bella, you're exhausted. Please. Just one night. No running. No disappearing." The plea cracked through Isabella's defenses. She let the bag slide to the floor and sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Her fingers brushed the quilt, the familiar scent of lavender clinging to the sheets. Zoe slid in beside her, careful, as though she were afraid to break the fragile moment. For a long while, they sat in silence, shoulders almost touching, hearts hammering. Finally, Zoe lay back against the pillows, turning her head to look at Isabella. "Lie down," she whispered. Isabella hesitated, then, with a soft exhale, stretched out beside her. The mattress dipped with her weight. Their arms brushed, and even that small touch sent a shiver through Zoe's chest. The dark was thick around them, broken only by the moonlight slipping through the curtains. "I don't remember the last time I felt safe enough to sleep," Isabella murmured. Zoe's throat tightened. She reached for her hand beneath the covers, found it, laced their fingers together. "Then sleep now. I'll keep watch." For a moment, Isabella's breath hitched, then she turned on her side, facing Zoe. Emerald eyes shimmered in the dim light. "You've always been my safest place." Zoe couldn't help herself. She reached out, brushed a strand of hair from Isabella's face, and let her thumb trace lightly across her cheek. "And you've always been my fire." They lay like that, watching each other, words unspoken but loud in the space between them. Slowly, Isabella's breathing steadied, her lashes lowering as exhaustion claimed her. Still, her fingers stayed locked with Zoe's, as if afraid that letting go would mean waking to find it all a dream. Zoe stayed awake long into the night, memorizing the shape of her face in moonlight, the rise and fall of her chest, the warmth of her skin against her hand. For the first time in 7 years, the hollow ache inside her eased. And as dawn touched the edge of the curtains, Zoe whispered into the quiet, words Isabella was too deep in sleep to hear. "You're home, Bella. This time, I'm not letting you go." Chapter 8, Morning Light. The smell of coffee lingered in the air, rich and warm. Zoe moved around the kitchen with a grace she didn't feel, her hands steadying themselves on simple tasks: eggs in a pan, bread in the toaster, coffee steaming in mugs. She needed something to do, something to keep her from staring at the woman sleeping down the hall, afraid she'd vanish if she looked away too long. Isabella stirred awake slowly, sunlight creeping across her face. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she was still drifting in some borrowed room. But the sheets were soft, the air smelled faintly of lavender and lilies, and the silence wasn't lonely, it was full. She sat up, fingers brushing over the quilt again, as if confirming this wasn't a dream. The memories in the walls pressed in on her, familiar and foreign all at once. She rose, padded barefoot through the hallway, her braid loose now, strands falling into her face. The house greeted her with ghosts. A guitar leaning against the wall. Lilies blooming in a vase by the window. The faint strains of a piano in the corner, not played, but waiting. Every object whispered, "You never left her." Not really. Isabella's throat tightened. She found Zoe in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hair messy, biting her lip as she flipped eggs. The sight stole her breath. "You're still terrible at hiding your nerves," Isabella said softly, leaning against the doorframe. Zoe turned, startled, then laughed awkwardly. "And you're still impossible to sneak up on." For a heartbeat, they just looked at each other. 7 years collapsed into that small kitchen. "Sit," Zoe said, nodding toward the table. "Breakfast's almost done." Isabella obeyed, sliding into a chair. The mug of coffee Zoe placed before her was steaming, the smell wrapping around her like a memory. She cupped it in her hands, staring into the swirl. "You kept everything," she murmured. Zoe paused, spatula in hand. "Everything that mattered. Everything that was you." Isabella's eyes lifted, glassy with emotion. "And what if I can't stay? What if I don't know how?" Zoe set the plate down in front of her, then leaned on the counter, her voice low but steady. Then stay for today. Stay for breakfast. Stay until you remember how. That's enough for me. Isabella blinked fast, the rawness in Zoe's words cutting through her defenses. She took a sip of coffee to hide the trembling in her lips. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of drifting loosen, not gone, but shifted, shared. And Zoe, watching her across the table, silently vowed, whatever storms lay ahead, she would not let Isabella drift away again. Chapter 9: The Shape of Home. The morning stretched slow, sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor in golden pools. Zoe sat across from Isabella, watching as she carefully cut into the toast Zoe had placed before her. It was such an ordinary sight, but to Zoe it felt extraordinary. 7 years of absence, of ghosts and longing, and here she was, sitting at Zoe's table, drinking coffee like she had never left. Isabella chewed slowly, avoiding her gaze at first. But when she finally looked up, Zoe was still staring, unable to disguise the raw wonder in her eyes. "What?" Isabella asked softly, a half-smile tugging at her lips. Zoe's voice came hushed. "I just forgot how it feels to see you across from me like this. To see you here. In my home." Isabella's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around the fork. "Don't make it sound like forever," she murmured. "It's just breakfast." "Maybe." Zoe leaned back, folding her arms. "But it feels like more." A silence fell, heavy but not uncomfortable. Isabella sipped her coffee, her gaze wandering around the room again, taking in the lilies, the piano, the details that whispered of her. She shook her head slowly. "You really built this whole house around me." Zoe nodded once. "Every corner. Every detail. It was the only way I knew how to keep you alive." The words hit Isabella like a blow. She set the mug down, her breath uneven. "You shouldn't have done that." "Why not?" Zoe's voice sharpened, then softened again. "Because you weren't here? Because you didn't think you'd come back?" "Bella, I couldn't not. You're a part of me I can't carve out." Isabella looked down at her hands, her eyes burning. She whispered, "I don't know if I deserve that kind of love." Zoe reached across the table, her fingers brushing Isabella's knuckles until she finally lifted her gaze. "It's not about deserving. It's about truth. And the truth is, you're the only home I've ever known." For a long moment, Isabella just sat there, trembling, her lips parted as if words might come. But none did. Instead, she slipped her hand into Zoe's, holding it tightly, as if anchoring herself. The morning carried on quietly after that. Zoe washed dishes while Isabella lingered in the living room, her fingers brushing over the piano keys. The house seemed to breathe easier with her in it. And though neither of them said it out loud, both felt the same fragile truth pressing in. This coffee, sunlight, silence, hands brushing and passing, this was what they had been starving for. Chapter 10: Until I'm Back on My Feet. Days slipped into a rhythm neither of them had dared to imagine. Coffee in the mornings, Zoe heading to her office while Isabella lingered at the piano or wandered through the garden. Evenings curled into quiet dinners, the hum of shared silence, the tentative laughter of two souls relearning how to breathe in the same space. But one night, as they sat on the couch with a movie playing unwatched on the screen, Isabella finally spoke. "I should tell you," she began, her voice careful, "I can't stay here forever." Zoe's body went still, her hazel eyes flicking from the screen to Isabella. "I'll stay," Isabella added quickly, "until I'm back on my feet. Until I figure out what I'm doing next. I don't want to take advantage of you, Zoe." Zoe's lips parted to protest, but she saw the fragile pride in Isabella's expression and stopped herself. Instead, she leaned back, voice quiet but firm. "Then stay as long as you need. I won't ask for more than that." But in her chest, the words she didn't speak burned. "I'd take forever if you'd give it to me." The next morning, Isabella wandered into Zoe's office for the first time. The space pulsed with life, screens glowing with lines of code, designs pinned to boards, stacks of files organized with meticulous care. Gemini was no longer just an idea, it was an empire, sleek and efficient, a reflection of Zoe's brilliance and discipline. Zoe sat at her desk, hair tied back, glasses sliding down her nose, her focus absolute as her fingers danced across the keyboard. For a long while, Isabella just watched her unnoticed. Here was a woman who had taken her grief and her loneliness and forged it into something unbreakable. Isabella's chest tightened. When Zoe finally looked up and saw her, her face softened instantly. "Hey, didn't hear you come in." Isabella leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. "You built all this. From nothing." Zoe shrugged lightly, but pride flickered in her eyes. "I had to keep moving forward. It was the only way not to drown." Isabella's smile was faint, wistful. "You've found your place. Your purpose." Zoe tilted her head, studying her. "And you?" The question lingered like smoke. Isabella looked away, her throat tight. "I don't know. I used to think it was music. But somewhere along the road, I lost it. Lost myself. Now I'm not even sure what my dream is anymore." Zoe rose from her chair, crossing the room to stand in front of her. She lifted a hand, brushing a strand of hair back from Isabella's face. "Then stay here until you find it," she said softly. "Let this be your place to land, even if just for a while." Isabella's eyes shimmered, torn between gratitude and fear. And though she nodded, whispering, "Just for a while," both of them felt the truth humming beneath. Some flames were never meant to burn out. Chapter 11. The Locked Door. The house was quiet that afternoon. Zoe was buried in calls and code, her voice carrying faintly from her office. Isabella wandered into the living room, restless, the way she often did when the silence pressed too heavily. The piano stood waiting. Dustless, tuned, cared for. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling. It had been years since she had let herself play for more than scraps in dark corners of forgotten bars. She pressed down. One note, then another. A fragile melody formed beneath her hands, broken at first, then smoother as old instincts resurfaced. Her eyes closed. She let herself drift, let her chest open to the music she had denied herself. And suddenly, the years of drifting melted away. For the first time in so long, she felt alive. When she finished, the last note hanging like smoke, she turned and found Zoe standing in the doorway. Zoe's hazel eyes were wet, her lips trembling between pride and pain. "You still have it," she whispered. Isabella swallowed, her throat tight. "It feels like pieces of me, waking up." Zoe hesitated, then took a breath. "There's something I need to show you." She led Isabella down the hall to a locked door she had always passed without question. From her pocket, Zoe drew a small silver key. Her hands shook as she turned it in the lock. The door creaked open. Inside was a studio. Soundproofed walls. A recording booth. Instruments lined up in perfect order. Microphones, soundboards, cables coiled neatly. Everything gleamed, as if waiting. Isabella's breath hitched. "Zoe, what is this?" Zoe stepped inside, her voice low, trembling. "I built it for you. Years ago. Couldn't bring myself to get rid of it, even when I thought you'd never walk back into my life. So, I locked it up, kept it safe." Isabella stood frozen, her eyes wide, shimmering with disbelief. "You can record here," Zoe went on, her voice thick with emotion. "Whatever you want. I'll help you get your music out. Gemini has connections. I've built software for half the producers in the city. I can open doors for you. Real doors. The kind you always dreamed of." Isabella's hand rose to her lips, a sob escaping before she could stop it. "All this time, you never stopped believing in me." Zoe stepped closer, her voice breaking. "I never stopped loving you. This studio, it's proof of that. My faith in you never left." For a moment, Isabella just stood there, trembling, staring at the dream she thought she had lost, only to find it had been kept alive, waiting for her, by the one person she had tried to leave behind. She turned to Zoe then, tears streaking her cheeks. "You gave me back more than music. You gave me myself." And in that studio, surrounded by the instruments of her dream, Isabella crumpled into Zoe's arms, the sound of her sobs echoing softly in the room that had been waiting all these years. Chapter 12. Finding Her Voice. The studio smelled faintly of new wood and old dreams. Isabella stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself as if she might splinter under the weight of it. Zoe sat quietly at the console, not touching the switches, not moving to fill the silence. She knew better. This was Bella's moment. Isabella stepped inside slowly. Her fingers brushed over the microphone, the guitar resting on its stand, the piano in the corner. Her throat tightened. It feels like walking into a memory I never had, but always wanted. Zoe's voice was soft. Then make it yours. It's been waiting. For a long moment Isabella just stood there, the silence heavy. Then she moved to the piano. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling. Finally, she pressed down, and a tentative chord bloomed. She played. At first it was broken, halting. But then, as her shoulders loosened, the melody poured out rich, aching, alive. Her voice followed, shaky at first, then stronger, fuller, until it filled the room like light spilling into a darkened space. Zoe closed her eyes, letting it wash over her. 7 years of silence, cracked open by the sound of Isabella finding herself again. When the last note faded, Isabella's hands stayed on the keys, her chest rising and falling. She turned, her eyes shimmering with fear and wonder. "I thought I'd lost this," she whispered. "I thought I'd lost me." Zoe rose slowly, crossing to her. She didn't speak at first. She just cupped Isabella's face, her thumb brushing away the tears. "You could never lose yourself, Bella. You just had to find the way back. And I'll walk that road with you, however long it takes." Isabella's breath caught. "Why? After everything I did, why would you still choose me?" Zoe's eyes burned, but her voice was steady. "Because love doesn't vanish just because it hurts. Because you're my fire, my twin flame. I can't unlove you, Bella. Even when you were gone, you were everywhere." The words cracked something inside Isabella. She leaned forward, her forehead pressing against Zoe's. "And I can't stop being afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you deserve someone whole, not someone broken like me." Zoe's hand slid into her hair, holding her close. "You're not broken. You're a song still being written. And I'll never stop listening." For a long moment, they stood like that, breathing each other in. The studio around them, built of Zoe's faith, now reborn in Isabella's voice, held the silence tenderly, like a secret too sacred to spill. And in that fragile space, Isabella finally believed, maybe, just maybe, she wasn't lost anymore. Chapter 13. The First Recording. The red light blinked on. The studio was hushed, expectant. Isabella stood in front of the microphone, headphones pressed tight over her ears. Her hands shook as she adjusted the stand, her chest rising and falling too fast. Zoe sat behind the console, quiet, steady, her hazel eyes fixed on Bella. She didn't say a word. She only gave the smallest of nods, a silent reminder, "I'm here. Always." Isabella closed her eyes. The first notes slipped out thin, wavering, like a thread pulled too tight. She stopped, wincing. "I can't," she whispered into the mic, pulling off the headphones. "I sound wrong. Broken." Zoe leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "No. You sound like someone who's finding her way again. That's not wrong, Bella. That's real." Isabella stared at her, searching, then sank back into her chair. She took a shaky breath, adjusted the headphones again. This time, when she began, the sound carried differently. Raw, imperfect, but alive. The lyrics she had scribbled in a notebook years ago slipped back into her mouth, like they had been waiting all this time. Her voice cracked once, but she kept going, pouring every jagged piece of herself into the song. Zoe didn't touch the controls. She didn't need to. She simply listened, her heart thrumming with every note, every fracture, every rise. When Isabella finished, the silence afterward felt sacred. She pulled the headphones off slowly, her hands trembling. It wasn't perfect. Zoe rose, walking into the recording booth. She stopped in front of her, so close Isabella could see the shine in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to be perfect. It was supposed to be you. And it was. Isabella's throat tightened. "You really think it's good enough?" Zoe smiled softly, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "It's more than good enough. It's beautiful. And if you let me, I'll make sure the world hears it. Every piece of you. Isabella swallowed hard, tears threatening. You've been my anchor through everything. Even when I didn't deserve it. Zoe shook her head. Bella, you never had to deserve me. You just had to be you. For the first time in years, Isabella let herself smile, not guarded, not tentative. A real smile. And Zoe felt the world tilt, just like it had that very first day in the bathroom when Emerald Eyes had met Hazel for the first time. The red light above the door flickered off. But in that room, a different light had ignited, one that had never truly gone out. Chapter 14. The Cocoon of Sound. The studio became their sanctuary. Days slipped into a rhythm, Zoe at her desk by day, Isabella drifting in and out of the studio, her notebook filling with half-songs, fragments of lyrics, lines that had lived in her for years, but never had a place to land. At first, she played shyly. A single song, broken in places. Then another. Zoe never pressed her, never demanded. She only watched, steady and present, her gaze like a lighthouse cutting through Isabella's storms. One evening, Zoe leaned against the doorframe as Isabella sat at the piano, frustration etched on her face. I can't finish this one, Isabella muttered, slamming the notebook shut. The words don't come. Zoe crossed the room, sat beside her on the bench. Play what you have. Isabella hesitated, then opened the notebook again. She played a few chords, sang the rough lyrics, her voice faltering in places. When she stopped, embarrassed, Zoe reached over and gently touched her wrist. Bella, she said softly, do you know what I hear? Honesty. And that's what makes music unforgettable. Not polish. Not perfection. Truth. Isabella's eyes shimmered, her throat tightening. She whispered, you make it sound like I still have something to give. Zoe smiled, leaning closer, her hazel eyes burning steady. You have everything to give. You just needed someone to remind you. The next day, Isabella recorded again. This time she didn't stop when her voice cracked. She let the cracks stay, raw and beautiful. Zoe sat at the console, hands folded, not touching the dials, because there was nothing to fix. And slowly, Isabella began to smile when she sang. At night, when they left the studio, Zoe would find her humming in the kitchen, notebook open beside her. She would scribble lines of lyrics between bites of toast, the music spilling back into her life like a flood she could no longer hold back. One night, after recording a song that left her trembling with both exhaustion and joy, Isabella looked through the glass at Zoe. You really believe in me, don't you? Zoe's voice carried clear and certain through the intercom. I never stopped. The words pressed into Isabella's chest like a bomb. And for the first time in years, she believed, maybe Zoe was right. Maybe she still had a voice worth hearing. The world outside the studio didn't exist yet. Inside, it was only music, only healing, only the constant presence of a woman who had built an empire yet still chose to stand quietly in the background, letting Bella find her fire again. Chapter 15. The First Leap. The studio was dark except for the glow of the console lights. Isabella sat on the edge of the piano bench, staring at the monitor where her last recording was still playing back. Her voice filled the room, raw and trembling, threaded with honesty. She hugged her knees to her chest as if bracing against it. It sounds too bare, she whispered. Like I'm showing too much. Zoe leaned against the console, arms folded, her eyes soft. That's why it's beautiful. Isabella turned toward her, shaking her head. Beautiful for you, maybe? You've always seen more in me than I see in myself. Zoe pushed off the console, crossing the room until she stood in front of her. She crouched, catching her gaze. Bella, you don't have to release an album tomorrow. Just one song. One person. Let someone else hear what I already know, that your voice is alive. Isabella's lips parted, fear flickering across her face. And who would that be? Zoe hesitated, then smiled faintly. There's a producer I trust. I've done systems for him for years, patched his entire studio software, written half his programs. He owes me more than a few favors. He listens carefully. And more importantly, he listens with heart. I think he'd hear you the way you deserve to be heard. Isabella's chest tightened. Send him my song? Zoe nodded. Just one. Anonymous, if you want. No pressure, no expectations. Just a first step. Silence stretched. Isabella's fingers twisted in her lap. The thought of her voice in someone else's hands terrified her, but the steadiness in Zoe's eyes anchored her. Finally, she whispered one song. No name, just the music. Zoe's lips curved in the faintest of smiles, pride shimmering in her gaze. One song, she repeated softly. That's all it takes to start a fire. Isabella exhaled, trembling but resolute. Then let's see if I can still burn. And as Zoe uploaded the file, her heart hammering, her fingers careful on the keys, Isabella sat beside her, equal parts terrified and exhilarated. For the first time in years, her voice was about to step outside the cocoon. Chapter 16. Echoes Beyond the Walls. The file had barely finished sending when Zoe's phone buzzed on the desk. Isabella flinched, her pulse leaping. Already? Zoe glanced at the screen. A name she trusted. She swiped the call before Isabella could change her mind. Yeah, Zoe answered, her voice even. You got it. A pause. Then a low breath from the other side of the line. Zoe, who is this? Isabella's stomach knotted. She pressed her fists into her knees, every muscle taut. Doesn't matter, Zoe said smoothly. Just tell me what you think. Another pause. Then, it's raw. Unpolished. But, God, there's something in it. Vulnerability you don't hear often. It cuts right through. Whoever she is, she's carrying something in her voice that can't be faked. Isabella's chest tightened. She turned her face away, unable to bear the weight of it. Zoe's eyes softened. So, it's worth something? Worth everything, the producer said without hesitation. If she's willing, I want more. And I don't say that lightly. Zoe smiled faintly, though she kept her voice measured. I'll talk to her. She ended the call gently, setting the phone down. The silence in the studio was deafening. Isabella sat frozen, staring at the floor. He heard me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Really heard me. Zoe crossed the space between them, crouched in front of her, tipping her chin up until emerald eyes met hazel. Of course he did. Because you bared yourself, Bella. And that's what makes it unforgettable. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. I feel like I've just been cracked open. Like the world can see every scar I tried to hide. Zoe brushed a thumb across her cheek, steady. Then let them see. Scars prove you survived. And your voice proves you're still alive. Isabella let out a trembling laugh, half sob, half relief. I don't know if I can handle being seen like that again. You won't handle it alone, Zoe whispered. Not this time. And for the first time, Isabella let herself believe it. Her music was out there. Her heart was out there. And Zoe was right beside her, steady as ever, holding her through the storm. Chapter 17. The Stillness Between. The house was quiet that night, the only sound the faint hum of the city beyond the garden. Isabella sat curled on the couch, knees drawn up, her notebook clutched to her chest. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, as if the weight of being seen had stripped away her last defenses. Zoe entered softly, 2 mugs in hand. She set one down beside Isabella and kept the other, settling on the couch a careful distance away. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, thick with all the things trembling just under the surface. Finally, Isabella's voice came quiet. When he said my voice cut through, she shook her head. I felt exposed. Like he was peeling back layers I've spent years trying to hide. Zoe set her mug aside, turning to her. That's what art is, Bella. Vulnerability that someone else recognizes in themselves. It hurts. But it heals too. Isabella pressed her forehead to her knees, her voice muffled. I don't know if I can carry that weight again. What if I break? What if I let everyone down? Zoe reached out slowly, her hand brushing Isabella's. She didn't pull, she simply let her presence be felt. Then break. I'll catch you. I always will. The words hung there, trembling. Isabella lifted her gaze at last. Emerald eyes glistened, searching, afraid. Why do you keep choosing me, Zoe? Even after I left, even after I vanished, why do you still hold on? Zoe leaned in, her voice raw. Because I can't unlove you, Bella. I tried. God, I tried. But you're the rhythm in every heartbeat, the reason I kept building, kept breathing. You're my home. Isabella's breath hitched. Slowly, she let Zoe pull her closer, their foreheads touching, their hands entwined. They sat like that for a long time, not speaking, not moving, just breathing each other in. And when Isabella finally whispered, "I'm scared," Zoe's answer was simple, steady, unshakable. "So am I. But we'll be scared together." In that stillness, wrapped in each other's presence, they found something they had both forgotten how to feel: peace. Chapter 18. Ready to try. The first light of dawn spilled across the room, soft and golden. Isabella woke slowly, her head resting against Zoe's shoulder. For a moment she stayed there, listening to the rhythm of Zoe's breathing, steady and grounding. Safe. She sat up, brushing a hand over her face. Something in her chest felt different, not lighter exactly, but sharper, like a blade finally drawn from its sheath. Zoe stirred, blinking awake, her hazel eyes immediately searching for Isabella. "Hey," she murmured, her voice husky with sleep. "You okay?" Isabella hesitated, then nodded. "No, but I think I'm ready to be." Zoe sat up, watching her carefully. "What does that mean?" "It means," Isabella took a breath, her voice trembling but resolute. "It means I want to try. To really step back into the world. To stop running." She turned, her eyes glistening with both fear and determination. "I want to sing again. Not just here. Out there." Zoe's chest tightened, pride and tenderness burning through her. She reached out, cupping Isabella's cheek. "Then we'll take it one step at a time. No rush. No pressure. Just one note, one song, one room at a time." Isabella let out a shaky laugh. "You make it sound simple." "It doesn't have to be complicated," Zoe said softly. "All you have to do is be you. The rest will follow." For a moment, Isabella just looked at her, tears threatening again. Then she leaned forward, pressing her forehead against Zoe's. "I don't know if I can do this without falling apart." Zoe's hand slid into her hair, holding her steady. "Then fall apart. I'll be right there to help you back up." The words anchored her. Isabella closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and when she exhaled, it felt like letting go of years of fear. She whispered, "Okay, let's try." And in that fragile morning light, Zoe knew, the girl in a hospital room many years ago, lost and trembling, was still there, but so was the woman who had survived the storm, who was ready now to rise and reclaim her voice. Isabella was ready, and Zoe would be there for every note of it. Chapter 19. The First Step Out. The studio lights dimmed as Zoe closed her laptop. Her phone buzzed with a message, and when she read it, a small smile tugged at her lips. "They're ready," she said softly. Isabella looked up from the notebook on her lap. "Who's ready?" Zoe crossed the room, crouched in front of her, her hazel eyes steady. "The producer who heard your demo. And 2 others I trust. No crowd. Just them, in a private space. They want to hear you, Bella. Just you and your music." Isabella's stomach dropped. Her notebook slipped slightly from her hands. "You mean, tonight?" Zoe nodded. "If you're ready." Isabella laughed nervously, pressing her palm against her chest. "I'm not ready." Zoe leaned closer, brushing a hand against hers. "Then we'll do it scared. Together." The room Zoe led her into later that evening wasn't grand, a small lounge tucked inside a producer's studio, soundproofed walls, warm lighting, just a few chairs set in front of a low stage. 3 people sat waiting, quiet, expectant. Isabella froze at the threshold, her pulse hammering. "Zoe, I can't." Zoe squeezed her hand. "Yes, you can. I'll be right there." Isabella took a step forward, then another. The piano waited in the corner, the microphone already set. Her hands trembled as she sat, her reflection glinting back in the polished black wood. She glanced toward Zoe. Zoe stood at the side, her gaze calm, steady, unwavering. "Breathe," Zoe mouthed. So, Isabella did. She closed her eyes, inhaled slowly, and let her fingers find the first chord. The melody rose, soft and trembling at first, then fuller as her voice followed, raw, vulnerable, cracked in places, but alive. The words spilled out, heavy with longing and loss, threaded with hope. Every note carried the years of wandering, every lyric carried the ache of finding home again. The room fell silent. No one moved. No one breathed. When the last note faded, Isabella's hands slipped from the keys. Her chest heaved. She dared to look up and saw their faces. Eyes shining. Heads nodding slowly. Moved. One of them whispered, "She's got it." The kind of voice people don't forget. Zoe's heart surged with pride, but she stayed quiet, letting Bella stand in her own light. Isabella sat there, trembling, the truth sinking in. She had stepped out of the cocoon. She had sung her heart raw in front of strangers, and instead of breaking, she had been heard. Zoe crossed to her then, her hand brushing the small of Isabella's back. "See," she whispered. "You didn't just survive, Bella. You lit the room on fire." Isabella swallowed hard, her eyes shimmering. "With you here, maybe I can keep burning." Chapter 20. The Decision. The house was quiet when they returned. Zoe set her keys on the counter, moving with her usual calm, but her eyes never left Isabella. Bella drifted into the living room like a woman caught between worlds. Her shoulders still shook faintly, adrenaline humming in her veins. She collapsed onto the couch, pulling her knees up, burying her face in her hands. Zoe sat beside her, not touching at first, just letting the silence hold. Finally, Isabella let out a shuddering breath. "I thought I was going to fall apart in there." Zoe's lips curved, soft and steady. "You didn't. You held the room. You bared your soul, and they listened." Isabella laughed shakily, wiping at her eyes. "I don't know how I did it." "Because it's who you are," Zoe murmured. "The stage, the music, it's in your blood. You were born to it." Isabella turned her head, emerald eyes searching Zoe's face. "Do you really believe that?" Zoe leaned closer, her voice low and fierce. "I've believed it since the day I met you in that bathroom stall. Since the first time I heard you laugh. You've always carried music in you, Bella. You can't outrun it, no matter how far you drift." Isabella's throat tightened. She dropped her knees, let her hands fall into her lap. For a long moment she sat still, staring into the quiet house Zoe had built, the piano in the corner, the lilies in the vase, the life waiting to be lived. Then, softly, like a vow whispered to herself, she said, "I want to go back on stage." Zoe's chest clenched. She reached for Isabella's hand, steadying it in her own. "Are you sure?" "I'm terrified," Isabella admitted, her voice trembling but clear. "But I can't keep hiding in small rooms forever. If I'm going to do this, I need to really do it. A stage. An audience. A first show." Zoe's thumb brushed across her knuckles, grounding her. "Then we'll make it happen. Together." Isabella looked down at their hands, then back up into Zoe's eyes. For the first time in years, her fear was matched by something stronger, resolve. "I'm ready," she whispered. And in that quiet living room, wrapped in the safety of Zoe's presence, Isabella chose to step out of the shadows and into her own light again. Chapter 21. The Rooftop Kiss. Zoe had insisted on a day out, despite Isabella's protests. "I don't need anything fancy," Isabella muttered as they walked into the boutique, her hands shoved deep into her pockets. Zoe only smiled, her eyes glinting with quiet mischief. "You need something that makes you feel like the star you already are. Just humor me." Isabella rolled her eyes, but when Zoe gently guided her toward a rack of dresses, something inside her softened. She trailed her fingers across silk and velvet, her breath catching at the thought of stepping on a stage in anything other than worn jeans and an old leather jacket. Zoe picked out a black dress first, simple, elegant, with a low back. Then a deep green one that shimmered like her eyes. "Try them," she said, firm but warm. Isabella hesitated. "Zoe, this is too much." Zoe's voice cut her gently. "No, you're not too much, Bella. And you're not forgotten. You deserve to step into that light looking like the fire you are." Something in Isabella cracked. She took the dresses and disappeared into the fitting room. When she stepped out in the green one, Zoe forgot how to breathe. Isabella fidgeted under her gaze, tugging at the fabric. "It doesn't look right." "Stop." Zoe's voice was low, rough. She stood, closing the distance, her hazel eyes burning into her. You look breathtaking. More than I imagined. Don't you dare tell yourself otherwise. Isabella swallowed hard, the intensity of Zoe's gaze stealing her protest. For the first time in years, she saw herself reflected in someone else's eyes as something more than broken. Later, they sat at a rooftop restaurant, the city spread below them like a galaxy of lights. The air was warm, threaded with laughter from nearby tables, but the world felt narrowed to just the two of them. Zoe ordered wine, her usual quiet grace anchoring Isabella's restless energy. They talked about music, about Gemini, about fragments of the past, and slowly, Isabella began to laugh. Really laugh. Zoe leaned on the table, her eyes soft, her voice low. Do you feel it, Bella? That you're enough. That you always were. Isabella's breath caught. She turned her face away, but Zoe's hand reached across, steady and warm, drawing her back. Emerald eyes met hazel fire. Zoe leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. You're worthy of every dream you thought you lost. You're worthy of love. Of me. Isabella trembled, her lips parting with a soft, shaky breath. And then Zoe kissed her. Not fierce, not rushed. A gentle brush of lips, tender and reverent, tasting of wine and years of longing. The city lights blurred around them as the world tilted, the storm quieting into something deep and still. When they pulled back, Isabella's eyes shimmered, wide and dazed. Zoe, she whispered. Zoe smiled faintly, her thumb brushing across her cheek. You don't have to say anything. Just, don't run. Isabella's voice cracked as she whispered back, I won't. And, for the first time, the promise didn't feel like a lie. Chapter 22, Into the Light. The venue wasn't grand, but the lights above the small stage felt blinding. Isabella stood backstage, clutching her guitar as if it were the only thing tethering her to earth. Her stomach twisted, her pulse wild. The murmur of the crowd beyond the curtain was low, curious, unaware of the storm brewing in her chest. Zoe touched her arm, grounding her. Breathe, she said softly. Just like in the studio. Just like in the living room. It's only you and the music. Isabella's throat tightened. And what if I choke? What if I fall apart in front of them? Zoe stepped closer, her hazel eyes steady, fierce with devotion. Then you fall apart beautifully. And they'll still remember you. Because you're unforgettable, Bella. You always were. Something in Isabella steadied. Not the nerves those still raged, but the certainty that Zoe would be there no matter what. The stage manager waved her forward. Isabella took a step, then another, until the lights swallowed her whole. The audience quieted. 100 eyes turned toward her. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted the strap of her guitar. She closed her eyes. One note. One breath. Her fingers found the strings. The first chord rang out, fragile but clear. She began to sing. The lyrics came from deep inside, carved from years of drifting, from loss and longing, from the moment Zoe's hand had found hers in the darkness and pulled her home. Her voice cracked once, but she didn't stop. She let it crack, let it bleed, let the truth carry her forward. And as she sang, silence thickened, not from disinterest, but from awe. The room leaned in, drawn by the raw vulnerability in every note. Zoe stood in the wings, her heart in her throat, tears pricking her eyes. She had always believed. But seeing Isabella there, bathed in light, her voice filling the room, it was more than she had ever dreamed. When the final note faded, the silence broke into thunderous applause. Isabella froze, wide-eyed, her chest heaving. The sound of hands, voices, cheers washing over her felt unreal, terrifying, beautiful. She turned instinctively, her eyes finding Zoe in the shadows. Zoe nodded, her lips curving into the softest smile, I told you so. Isabella bowed her head, then looked back to the audience. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. She was standing in her own fire, her voice echoing into the world again. And she knew, with Zoe by her side, she wouldn't be extinguished. Chapter 23, Fear and Fire. Weeks blurred into months. What began as a trembling step into a small stage grew into nights of packed rooms, lights blazing, the crowd swaying to Isabella's voice. She no longer cracked under the spotlight, she commanded it. Each performance left her stronger, bolder, as if every show burned away another layer of fear. The studio followed. Recordings poured from her in long sessions, her voice carrying raw truth into microphones that captured not just notes, but pieces of her soul. Producers called. Labels circled. Her name began to ripple through the underground scene like a promise of something unstoppable. Yet when the lights dimmed, when the applause faded and she returned to the quiet of Zoe's house, the storm always waited for her. One night, after a particularly electric show, Isabella stood in the garden, still trembling with adrenaline. The city hummed in the distance, but the lilies around her swayed in the quiet night. Zoe found her there, barefoot in the grass, her emerald eyes bright but haunted. "You were unstoppable tonight," Zoe said softly. Isabella turned, her lips curving faintly. It felt like flying. Like I wasn't afraid anymore. Zoe stepped closer, studying her. But Isabella's chest tightened. She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together. "But the fear doesn't vanish. Not completely. Every time I walk off stage, there's this voice in my head that says, what if it ends? What if they stop clapping? What if the person I love most," she faltered, her throat closing, "leaves?" Zoe's breath caught. Her heart thudded. "Bella." Isabella's eyes shimmered as she forced herself to meet Zoe's gaze. "I've spent years running, Zoe. From grief, from the world, from you. And even now, when I finally feel alive again, part of me is still terrified that one day I'll turn around and you'll be gone." Zoe stepped into her hands framing Isabella's face, her hazel eyes fierce. "Look at me. I'm not going anywhere. Not now, not ever." Isabella's lips trembled. Her voice cracked as the words broke free, raw and unguarded. "I love you, Zoe. I've always loved you. Even when I disappeared, even when I tried to bury it, it never left me. And that terrifies me more than any stage, any crowd. Because if I lose you..." Zoe silenced her with a kiss, not gentle this time, but fierce, claiming, burning with all the years they'd lost. Isabella melted into it, her arms winding around Zoe's neck, tears mixing with the heat of their mouths. When they broke apart, breathless, Zoe pressed her forehead to hers. "Then don't lose me. Love me. Completely. I'll never leave you, Bella. You're my fire, my forever." And for the first time, Isabella let go not of her fear, but of the wall she had built around her heart. She let herself burn in the light of love she had denied for too long. That night, under the stars and the lilies, Isabella Siegel finally admitted the truth she had always known. The music was her gift, but Zoe was her home. Epilogue: Fire and Home. Years had passed, but the house still smelled of lilies and coffee. Morning light spilled through wide windows, casting soft golden patterns across the piano where Isabella sat, coaxing notes from the keys. Her hair fell in loose waves, her voice humming low, unfinished lyrics drifting into the quiet. In the corner, a young student watched with wide eyes, her guitar on her lap. Isabella smiled gently, patient, guiding her through the chord again until her fingers caught. "You don't have to be perfect," Isabella said softly. "You just have to be honest. That's all music asks of you." The girl nodded, relief flickering in her face. When the lesson ended, Isabella walked her to the door. Outside, the world knew her name. Her albums lined shelves, her voice filled radios, her songs carried across stages. But Isabella had never chased stadiums or spotlights. She had chosen something truer. Her music out there, reaching who it needed to, while she lived here, teaching, recording, breathing. She turned and found Zoe in the doorway, leaning against the frame with that quiet smile that still unraveled her. "How is she?" Zoe asked. "Brilliant," Isabella said, slipping her arms around Zoe's waist. She just needed someone to believe in her. "Sounds familiar," Zoe teased, pressing a kiss to her temple. The years had changed Zoe too. Her company had grown into a quiet titan, her name whispered with respect in rooms of power. Yet here, in the soft hush of home, She was simply Zoe, the woman who had built more than empires. The woman who had built a life with her. Isabella laid her head against Zoe's chest, listening to the heartbeat that had anchored her through every storm. "You know," she murmured, "I don't need more. Not bigger, not brighter. Just this. Just us. My music out there, your world thriving, and this house, these mornings." Zoe kissed her hair, her voice warm, certain. "And you'll have it. Always." In the stillness, the years of struggle and fear seemed like distant echoes. What remained was simple, undeniable. Isabella's fire, Zoe's constancy, their love woven into every note, every breath, every tomorrow. They had found their home, and neither would ever be lost again. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like this video and follow me for more stories. You are always welcome here, and leave me a comment or a thumbs up, just letting me know if you like the story and would like more, or is there perhaps an idea that you would like to share or let me write for you.